thank you for everyone for joining today's talk.
I'm not answering that guy's questions.
I'm super excited to get this one started. Before doing so, a couple of reminders for those who are tuning in. If you have a question, please send it to the Kalakars US post. We'll curate it, and then during the Q&A, you can unmute yourself and share your video if you'd like. Another reminder is please limit your question to one question and try not to ask follow-ups. I know that's hard to do, but we're trying to get in as many questions as possible. So that all said, I'm going to introduce our two guests for Meet the Kalakar today. We have a dope-ass rapper, actor, Utkarsh Ambudkar, who you've seen in films like Pitch Perfect, Brittany Runs a Marathon. For the parents out there, he's in Disney's Mira, the Royal Detective.
Oh, that's I see now. Mira's a good deal, yeah.
He is going to be in the upcoming film Mulan for Disney, and he also spit some rhymes at this year's Oscars. With Utkarsh today is Academy Award winner Taika Watiti, who is the artist behind Jojo Rabbit, Thor Ragnarok, What We Do in the Shadows, Boy. His short film Two Cars, One Night was nominated for an Oscar as well.
And lost.
Lost, yes. They will both be seen next in Free Guy, coming out next month. So welcome to both of you guys to Meet the Kalakars.
Free Guy, the movie in which the two brown men are the bad guys.
All right, so I'm going to jump right into it. Both of you guys wear multiple hats, Utkarsh, with your music and acting. Taika, you're acting, you're writing, you're directing. I sort of wanted to talk about, how you guys balance the work between the two. And do you find it that you have a different lens when judging a piece that you're going to write or direct or act in, or all three?
I don't have an Oscar.
Well, I guess as the Oscar winner here, I should probably take this one.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, I feel like I've always worn all these different hats. Just growing up, where I was never really in. I didn't go to film school. I didn't choose one particular thing as my job. I started off as a painter, wanting to just paint pictures, and that's probably the thing I did. I was the most serious about until I was about 28, 29, and then I thought maybe I'll get into film. So I started at about 29, but before that's pretty much all I wanted to do. But on the side, again, I was doing a lot of comedy with Jermaine and Brett, and I was for like 12 years I was doing that, and then and writing my own plays and we were directing each other, making all the costumes and making the props and putting on these plays and stuff, because no one would hire us for this sort of serious theater, because they just didn't want people like us. I'm not going to say what people like us means, we know, in their shows. And so we just made all of our own stuff up, and then learned to wear all of these different hats just out of necessity, because it was very hard to figure out how to do things, and you had to figure it out yourself. So I'm very used to acting in my own stuff, because I've just done it throughout my life, and it's just sort of fun for me to do that. And like there's a director Taika, writer Taika, an actor Taika, and also the caterer Taika, and there's also the editor Taika, and the distributor Taika. Whoa, look at Michael Das, and so I was. So I'm very used to all of that, and I quite enjoy like mixing that stuff up. Also, I'm a massive egomaniac, so I want to control every single facet of the creative process.
Actually, talking about control, how do you sort of maintain your voice and control when you're choosing projects? And question for you too, Utkarsh, as you kind of get to bigger and bigger productions, a lot of the time your voice can be lost. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how do you continue to control that?
Awards help, and getting rich and famous helps.
Well, you've done it throughout your career, though, before the awards.
They leave you alone when people, like, if you've done enough stuff and you haven't screwed it up yet. But, I mean, I had to fight a long time to be taken seriously on a lot of stuff. And now I'm worried, because now people just say, oh, that's a good idea, to any old shit I say. And that's really worrying, because 80% of my ideas are pretty bad. So now I don't know. I used to be surrounded by people who would like check me on a lot of stuff. And good sort of filter. That was a good quality control, was having your friends around.
Yeah. Utkarsh, how do you sort of deal with that, especially with music? You know, your music has evolved over the years as well. You know,
Yeah.
I would love to hear sort of your process on the evolution of that.
You know, music sort of was the backbone, and that's what started it for me. I wanted to play in the NBA, and then that didn't. I chose a different path. I was heavily recruited out of middle school, and I just said, you know what? I think this song and dance thing is for me. So music has always been kind of what I've loved. I got to college, I was battling, writing tracks. You know, the movie 8 Mile was very much similar to my life, and then music sort of informed the film. Pitch Perfect was because I beatboxed and rapped, and because Donald Glover said no to the role of Donald, because he was already rich and famous and could do his own shit. And was like, I'm not going to Baton Rouge for 3 months, and good on him. And then Mindy saw me rap in Pitch Perfect and wanted a rapping brother on her show, and that's how I got that. And I've just tried to not do things that would set back the culture. And sometimes you look at things and you go, I mean, it's tough because you need to pay rent, and I don't begrudge anyone for having to pay their bills and taking roles that, you know, some of us sitting in our backyards with our staircases with ivy behind us, we try, or our very expensive Yoda statues. We're not going to judge anyone. I mean, I've been there and I've taken jobs that were hopefully to give me a little bit of stability so that I could write and make my own stories later on. But I still audition a lot. I mean, I still have to fight for roles. I still have to go in and prove myself constantly. I think that's what's so appealing about where Taika's at and what he's done with, like, you know, Two Cars One Night, and with Boy. Boy is, like, in my opinion, a perfect film. I love it. I'm so happy that Taika and I are friends. It's such a blessing, honestly, and it's an honor, because when I met him, we're probably friends because I showered him with praise when I did meet him. I was like, you don't understand. He's so good. But it's tough. It's challenging to be able to tell our own stories. Go ahead, Taika. Are you muted?
Oh, he can't unmute. There you go. 1 second.
There we go.
Yeah.
It's hard. The banter is difficult when they constantly keep force muting us.
Yeah, that's right.
Whoever keeps muting them, please stop.
But I think that's what's appealing about Taika's career, is he's told his own stories, and he's been, like, super proud of his background and his the Maori culture, and you stayed the language of New Zealand. My wife is Kiwi. Like, Taika speaks in a language, I guess even Thor sort of has the rhythms and patterns of the Kiwi sensibility, but
yeah,
never strays from it.
I think, like, the thanks, bro, I love you.
Yeah.
The other thing is that the back to me again, is coming here after my first feature, Eagle versus Shark, and I came here and people were like, why don't you make this, like, really shitty romantic comedy? And I kind of, like, basically try and repeat what I'd just done, and the temptation was just to make some money, but I didn't feel like I'd really found my voice at that time. Didn't feel like I was strong enough to hold my own against people who would have notes or who would say, oh, I'm not sure about this. You know, so I decided to go back home to New Zealand and make a second film, which was Boy. And then I came here again and they said, do you want to, you know, we can be more interested in this sort of thing and this and this and this. And I kept going back. I went back 4 times to keep doing my own stuff, where I had full control and could safely sit in this, like, nest of support where I could develop my voice and become confident in the kind of stories I wanted to tell and how I wanted to tell them, and really who I was as an artist. And once I'd finished Hunt for the Wilder People, when I came onto Thor, I felt so fully aware of who I was and how I make things that it was, yeah, it would have been very hard to shake me from that. And so I became my own person, and I knew the sound of my own voice, and I knew it was a New Zealand style of filmmaking.
How do you go from small movies, Boy, Wilder People, What We Do in the Shadows. Like, what is the pitch like for Thor? Where you're like, yeah, my biggest budget, let's say 10 million. You go from 10 to 300 million or 400 million. How do you make that jump as a director?
My biggest budget was 5 million New Zealand dollars when I moved to.
So it's like 3 million, 3.5 million
Yeah.
US.
And so I went to Thor, and my pitch was, I tried to tell them it was going to be like With Nail and I in Space, which is a great British comedy film from the 70s that everyone should watch. And yes, WITHNAIL and I. And none of them had heard of that. And then I sort of said, I want to bring some humor and all the stuff to it. And then I realized what pitching really is just seeing if you guys could handle hanging out for 2 years and working together. And they were really cool people. So I thought, yeah, okay, I can make this happen. I didn't want to come in and like shake things up and, completely like redesign how Marvel makes movies, because it was their 17th film. And each one of the films before that had been a box office success.
No, but you must have been aware that Thor was the weakest of all the properties. That Thor sequel,
yeah,
I'd say as a huge fan, is unwatchable.
Yep. Well, that is true. And I saw that as an asset. I saw that as a positive going in, because most people are like, oh, I don't want to touch that franchise. That's like,
right.
But I thought, well, there's nothing to lose, because the first two were pretty bad, and the only way is up after that. Because it would be harder to come in and do Iron Man 4, because you feel like you're following trying to fit in some big shoes there. So then I played them a sizzle reel that I made, which is a whole lot of clips of different films set to Immigrant Song by Led Zepp, and they sort of set the tone and the mood and stuff. And this is a cool experiment, and a good thing for me to do anyway. It was just to like trawl through films that had little scenes or moments that shared this tonal quality with what I was trying to do, and then make a music video essentially with all of these clips and little bits of dialogue and scenes and stuff. And that really gave a sort of overview of the whole film, how I wanted the film to look and feel. And at the end of the thing, they said, "But that's a cool song. Who's that?" I said, "Oh my god." And then I thought, but then they were great to work with, because they just they understood who I was and like the kind of things I made. They said, I knew that I had not been brought in because of my experience making these big films. It was because I was like good at character and dialogue and human moments, and keeping things, making things entertaining, but also giving them this this core of sort of profoundness and or profundity, and just making stuff that's entertaining but also makes you feel. And I think that's what they needed. And then they would just take care of all the explosions and all the cool looking stuff. And that's why it was quite a good relationship. And but then just to let me talk more.
Yeah, why not?
Because we've you want us to use up these minutes. But the big step there was no real difference between the films I was making and shooting on Thor, except for there were 300 more people around and the food was better. But it's like a bigger thing. It's way more expensive. But then at the end of the day, it's just whatever's inside the rectangle. It's exactly the same. Doesn't matter if it's $200 million film or $1 million film. You're looking at people inside a rectangle and wanting them to say these lines quickly and convincingly, and that's all it comes down to. Some of them are dressed like space Vikings, and other people are dressed like hunters in the woods. And it's the same intention when you look through the monitor. You just like, please make this work and make it believable.
That's tough, though. I mean, sorry, Adil, you talk.
No, please continue. This is great.
So, Mike, Taika, so two cars, one night, right? For those who haven't seen this short film, it's a seminal work in sort of the New Zealand film culture, right? Like everyone, I shot Mulan in New Zealand. That's where I met my wife. I was there for 6 months. And like, to say that Taika is well respected is a vast understatement. And I don't need to massage his ego anymore, but the dude is well loved. Cars One Night is like canon, right? It's required viewing for Kiwis. But you take that small film. Quick side question: did you try to convince all the nominees at the Oscars to pretend like they were sleeping?
Yeah, there's footage somewhere online that you can watch where it's me pretending to be asleep at the Oscars when they go pan past us, and no one else did it. Everyone else said, let's still pretend we're asleep because I've heard it's going to be really boring. And the camera's going to go past all of the nominees in the crowd. And they went, haha, that's a great idea, yeah. Not meaning, yeah, let's do it. They just meant, yeah, that's a funny idea. So then it happened and I was the only one who did it. And then...
I've seen the footage. I mean, it's bonkers that you had the balls to do it back then. But here's the question, like you start with no stakes. How do you measure the stakes for yourself? Do you feel pressure as you gain notoriety, make money, get awards, start being recognized for your work in films like Green Lantern? Do you feel more...
Don't know what that is. What is it?
Phenomenal movie. It's very underrated. I just want to let you know.
I'll check that out. I'll write down Green Lantern.
Yeah, Lantuhn.
Lantern. Yeah, I definitely feel the pressures still. Like there's more, that pressure of people's second album. For me, it's like the pressure of like the 8th album feels even more now, and but coupled with that, I have a feeling of just like I want a holiday, and I want to be like I don't like quarantine has been quite interesting because just like for the first month I was pretty motivated and I was like writing a lot, and now I'm just like, why were we doing anything? I've reached that space, that existential crisis moment where you're like, well, what's the point in movies? Why do people need movies? We just need to like look at like do more important stuff. If I write something, will it ever be made? Maybe it will never come out of this. Maybe people never go to the movies. Oh, well, I won't bother writing it. What's the deadline? What do you mean you need it next week? No one's going to be filming for a year. When do you ever need this script? So I just don't hand anything in anymore. And then they don't actually bother. So it turns out deadlines aren't even a thing anymore.
Nope.
I had a script that was due 3 weeks ago, and I just didn't hand it in or tell them, and I haven't heard anything. No one's complaining. It's like they realize too, maybe we don't need the script right now. So it's an interesting space right now. I'm like feeling very uncreative.
No, same here for sure. I have a script as well that's due, and I had the executive email me today, like, where's it at? How are we feeling? And I was like, super great. Not going to show it to you. There's no reason. There's no reason. All you're going to do is read it and lose interest. You'll just have enough time to think it's a bad idea.
You're right. You know what's going to happen? It's like, and it happened to me. I handed in a script for something that wasn't going to shoot for a year and a half, and handed in super early. And I was like, "This is good. They can read it, let it percolate. It'll be ready." And then it just went through a series of getting different notes and things until it just turned into a piece of shit. And now I feel like I handed it in way too early. Handed in the day before shooting. What's that?
Was it Akira?
No. That's
Are we allowed to talk
getting
about
really good. That was getting really good, that script. That's not dead. It's not completely dead. I just had to take a break from it because of Thor and COVID-19.
Good.
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. I mean, that really gives a lot of insight. But actually, Taika, you sort of spoke a little bit about your process. I'd love to hear about, your process when it comes to writing, and then maybe even a little bit of your directing. A lot of our attendees also wear multiple hats, so it'd be great to hear some insight on, when you're writing for yourself, you know, I know for Jojo Rabbit that wasn't the intention, but when you're writing for yourself and then when you're directing yourself, how do you put together your days and all that?
I don't usually write for myself. Usually I just put myself, like, cast myself towards the end of the casting process. I thought, okay, there's got to be something in here that I can do. On What We Do in the Shadows, that we'd definitely written for ourselves. We'd written, you know, just we knew we were going to play those characters from the start. But we usually would write the other person's character. This feels strange writing for yourself, going, this is going to be so funny when I say this thing, and feels like really, that's like, so if you spend most of your time writing for another character, it's for like, it's also a nice surprise to read that and go, oh, I could work with that, instead of reading the script and knowing you've taken all the best lines in the scene. So, but then with like Korg in Thor, that was like, he was probably only in one scene at the start, but I had it contractually. I was able to do passes on that script, and so I went in and I just beefed that up and put him throughout the entire film. Completely changed him. It was like, this guy's back again. What? How come this character's? Wait, he's in the spaceship at the end.
Totally worked.
It totally worked. And then also, like, I was, when I was shooting that, I was just doing the accent just to kind of make people laugh. You know, it's like, oh, this is what, because like, I was like, oh yeah, because like, you know, Polynesians, like especially the really big ones in Auckland and stuff, and, you know, that you come up to at clubs who are working the door, like often like there's just really delicate voices, even though they break your leg. And they're like, oh, sorry, bro, no, we're actually at capacity tonight, so you're gonna have to deny you entry tonight. And then, you know, as it's like beating you up, sorry, bro, I'm having to choke you out. Sorry about this. Not my choice. I didn't want to do this. And so then, so I just found that funny, and that was just like going to be a temp, like a scratch recording. But then Kevin Feige said, I love that voice. That's the way he's got to talk. And so it just stuck. But then, yeah, the other way, like, okay, here's what, directing, I usually wing it. I usually just go, because I haven't watched that many films to reference. Like, I like, you know, there are people like Edgar Wright and stuff who have watched like 10,000 movies, and I've watched 10. And so I just look at things and go, what feels right? Does this look cool? Is this something I would want to watch? And what would me and my friends like to watch? And like, what's just something that just got to feel like, does this feel like a Taika moment? And then I kind of go with that. The writing part of it for me is that what I usually do, and it's a really horrible process, and no one ever wants, whenever I tell people about this, no one ever wants to do it. But what I usually do is write a script, put it aside for about a year, and then reread it, or 6 months maybe is good. Come back, read it, maybe read it twice if you can bear to do it. But even in 6 months, you become a different person. And what you read after that time away from it, it doesn't feel like you've written it. It feels like someone else has. So I read it, then I delete the whole thing and all versions of it from my computer, and then I rewrite it from memory. And usually a 120-page script turns into like 80 pages, because you've just remembered the parts that are resonant and that mean something to you, and that you remember. And they usually remember the parts and that means you usually remember the parts of the story, not like, you know, cool crane shot or like spaceship zooming part. It's like the character moments and what's driving the story. And so then you come away from that with a script that is very tight, very lean, and is just it's just basically the film, the story. Then you can add in the jokes and all the other kind of the flavor and stuff, and flesh that out a bit more. But I think it's a good practice to get into, is to distance yourself from your work so you don't become attached to your first draft. Rewrite it as if someone else has read it, and then you realize what's the most important parts of that story. And I think my work's gotten better from doing that. Distance plus time, as Einstein said, distance and time equals better scripts.
You did say that.
Yeah, that's a gem. That's great. That's a really interesting approach, because, you know, we've been talking to some other
Nobody's
directors.
going to do it. I know none of you are going to do it. Seems like a good idea. No one wants to read 120 pages and then write it all from memory. No one.
Just a reminder to everyone, about 10 minutes or so, 5-10 minutes or so, we'll start opening it up. So if you have any more questions, or if you have questions, please send them in and start asking them. Utkarsh, what about you and your process? I mean, you do write. Clearly, you're writing something right now. I'd love to hear about a little bit what you know, what you're working on, and two, what sort of approach do you take?
I work with partners. I you know, I get almost the full idea, beginning, middle, end of the story. I see in pictures. I sort of can see what I want my opening to look like, what my ending to look like. I can visualize it. I see the internal conflict, some of our character moments, and then the goal is to get the fuck out of the way of the idea. Just like super, it comes in a wave, almost fully formed, and then like Taika says, I just try and document it or write it down. And with music as well, music sort of comes with the melody, the chorus, the lyrics. They sort of come quickly. And then I try and get out of the way, because you get into this idea of I want to fine tune, or so-and-so won't like this, or what audience is it for? When I start asking those kind of more non-spiritual questions, things can get a little muddy for me. So that's where having a writing partner really helps, because I kind of like lay it down and I say, and probably it sort of serves the same purpose as what Taika's talking about, although his sounds much cooler, and I hopefully one day will try it.
It sounds cooler, but it's not cool. It's a horrible thing to have to do.
Sounds very difficult.
It's not enjoyable.
Yeah, but I mean,
Turn everyone off the idea. There you go.
Your track record speaks for itself, so I think maybe it's worth a try. If it works for you, I'm sure. I have no idea if it'll work for me. Probably won't, but I could try.
Yeah.
I work with a writing partner, and I go, these are my ideas. These are the pictures that I see in my mind. You take it, you outline it, and let me see what you build with it. And then in that way, I am able to maintain that distance that Taika is talking about, which is really important. And I'm able to get out of it. With music, it's really hard. There's some musicians here. Once you listen to that song 50, 60 times, and you're trying to rewrite the bridge, you're trying to find why your chord progression in the chorus isn't quite working. You've gotten all the spiritual input, and now you're working with math and science. So like, do I need a 4-bar or an 8-bar refrain? Why is this not working? How many, do I start in silence? Do I start with a kick drum? Like, those things can get quite tedious. And having outside ears, like Taika said, having people who are, dude, it's so weird talking with Taika. I just want to listen to you talk. I feel so completely.
No, man. It's always good for me to hear other artists like go through the same shit, like because sometimes you feel quite alone, and you feel, because like basically doing anything creative, the biggest battle like even more than critics is self-doubt, and the constant voice in your head is like, why am I doing this? Who in the world wants to watch this piece of shit? Or like, why am I even writing this idea? This seemed like a good idea last month, but this, like, I wouldn't watch this now. And so you constantly got those voices in your head, and they'll never go away. Every director in the world, unless they have like a mental problem, has got self-doubt and is wondering if this is good enough, and if they're going to fail, and like, is this the last chance you've got? And that nervousness is actually what I think sends you into the creative space and into like a good place. Like David Bowie, this is a really great, very short piece of an interview with him, where he's talking about the creative space, and he likens it to walking into the ocean, and you know, when the water is coming up to your neck, and like you're just starting to lose your footing on the bottom of the ocean and stuff, and there's that nervousness, like, oh, am I going to go under? Am I not? And you don't know, you're losing your footing. You're not sure if you're on stable ground. And he's like, that's when I know that I'm in a space where something good is going to come out of it, and I'm struggling for a solution, which is why I like having obstacles. I like having things standing in my way of success. I like things to be chaotic and hard, because I feel like if something's too easy, if something comes too easy, it feels like pointless. this, and it doesn't feel like I earned it. It doesn't feel like, and more often than not, it's been a bit mediocre, some of that stuff that I've done. And sometimes there's like a spark, like Eagle versus Jojo Rabbit. I wrote in about 3 weeks or something, 3 or 4 weeks, and basically nothing changed from that first draft. Like it was like, and I'd never written a script, page one all the way through before. I do what Utkarsh does. I just go like, oh, okay, here's the beginning, here's a cool ending, here's a cool bit middle, and then I need bits to glue it all together and make it.
Exactly.
Like, it's like, I know what the poster looks like, and I know the music for the trailer. How do I now make that a film? And so that's usually how I work. But this script was just, I wasn't even like in control of my fingers really. I was just like, and then it just sort of happened, and I could see the picture in front of me. I could see scenes like, now obviously this has to happen, and now this has to happen. And yes, it was adapted from the book, but it's nothing like the book.
It was such a disarming film in that way, because the pace, it really lulled you. It lathered up. Like, I was so surprisingly moved by the ending, right? Like I was in the movie, and the pace, it was sort of slow. There was a lot of comedy and there was rhythm in the dialogue, but the pace of the film itself is very measured. And when we get to that final, if anyone hasn't seen it, like, sorry, but when we get to the end where we actually get the payoff and we see them dance, I was so surprised at how touched I was. Are you drinking coconut water too? What do you got there?
Drinking a little vitamin C.
I got a little cloudy beverage too. Cheers.
You don't want to know why it's cloudy.
Already.
But that script, that thing came to me pretty easily, and I'd say that's an example of sometimes you're touched by, what they say, the muse, or like there's just something that you're not in control of what's happening, and it happens very easily, and it's very good. But it's very rare. So I'd say, like, my warning is, don't trust that process all the time, because it's like a little gift that happens now and then where something happens. You're like, oh, look at that. I wrote Bohemian Rhapsody. And, but if you think you're doing that every time you touch the keyboard, it's a big mistake to get that comfortable and think that everything you write is just perfect and just amazing, because I can tell you it's not.
Yeah.
It's never that good.
My challenge is, like, you talk about things coming slowly. The inspirations, whether good or bad, for me, generally come very quickly. And then the challenge is staying engaged when things come so sort of fleetingly. The quality could be great, it could be small, but my challenge is, like, how do I finish now what I've started? Because there's a little bit of, like you said, there's less of a struggle. So my thing is always, like, my 2 rules for myself are get the fuck out of the way, and more importantly, finish what I start. Because I am notorious for being like, that's a great chorus, that's a great story, I have a few pictures, I don't want to do the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
And so it's been sort of my challenge, and I've gotten much better at doing it because I forced myself to do it. But completing these ideas that come quickly is tough.
Yeah, I'm the same. And once you get to a certain point in a screenplay, you do get to page sort of 60 or 70, and you realize, okay, I've broken the back of it. I'm now on this downward slope where I can, you can really just see everything. And then it's just about typing out what you see in your head, because you know how it works. And that's that feeling when you're getting towards the end of finishing that draft, and you just think you were an absolute genius, and you think you were like God's gift to creativity. Like, first you're like, the end, let's drink. And then you're like, you send it off, and then you realize, and then you read it 6 months later. What I do, I go, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. And I'm like, who wrote this? And that's where you've got to, like, take a step back, give it some time to, like, sit there and rot, and then have a look at it. And then you're like, because all of the, I would say, I don't even know what the quote is, what this comes from, but something floats to the surface. What is that from? The soap floats towards the surface? No, what is it?
No,
the cream. The cream floats to the top. I think it's the cream floats to the top. Well, if you're not lactose intolerant, then it's a good thing, and the cream floats to the top with your script.
Yeah. Almond milk has cream too, though, so don't worry.
The oil, the precious nut oil floats right to the top of the beverage, as they say.
Yep.
You scoop that out, and you put that into a new.
Yep.
So before we get to our audience questions, we do a quick fire rapid round where I'll ask you 5 questions.
Okay, here's the answers: yes, yes, no, yes, no.
Oh, interesting. That tells us a lot about you, Taika.
Yeah, I'm very honest.
So the first question is, we'll start with Utkarsh. One book you'd recommend to a filmmaker or artist. Doesn't have to be a filmmaking book, but one book you'd recommend to read.
This is the first story that popped into my head. It's a Salman Rushdie book called Haroun and the Sea of Stories.
Great book.
That's what you get.
Taika?
First book that popped into my head was one that I'd like to say I've just read. It's bullshit. I read 2 years ago, but it just popped into my head. It is one of the last books I read. It's The Psychopath Test by Ron Johnson, and he did another book called The Men Who Stare at Goats. And this film is about psychopaths, and they made a test to see if you could tell if you're a psychopath, and so it's a great book. Read it.
Have you taken the test?
Well, the thing is like there's parts of the test through the book, and you start wondering. You think, oh my god, I'm like that. And then, but the cool thing is like if you're thinking you're a psychopath, then you're not a psychopath.
Oh, interesting. The self-awareness. I guess the second question here is one film that you find yourself going back to for inspiration.
Well, I always go back to the films. I always go back to The Graduate, Badlands, and I don't know. There's a bunch of them. Those two for sure. I'll go back to.
I'm thinking like Rocky, aspirational stories.
Yeah, Rocky, yes.
Underdog, The Heart, stories with a lot of heart. I mean, you can find that anywhere. I just watched Rocky Balboa, which is so underrated. This guy, Sly Stallone and Taika have so much in common, by the way. You guys need to sit down together, pick each other's brains. Get him in Thor. He's in the Marvel universe. Clue. I always go back to Clue for rhythm and pace of dialogue. Those are 2 good ones for right now.
Oh, Clue. I haven't seen that.
You can't name any of the films you just said, so the next question, though, is one film you wish you made.
Inception.
Master and Commander.
Oh, I love it.
The next question is what would you tell your younger self?
Don't do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do it. But be careful.
Watch out.
Do it, but don't change anything except these 50 things.
Well, name one of the 50 things. You got to name at least one.
Some of them are illegal.
Yeah, right.
I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes I think, yeah, I'd love to go back and change something. I'm pretty happy with the way things went. I'd say I'd remind myself not to listen to old people too much. Not to listen to the advice of people who have done a lot of things. So I think and sometimes in my early parts of my career, I still get it now, just being patronized and condescended to by people who have made, like, some crew members, maybe some DPs or something, who have made a lot of films, and that doesn't mean anything to me. That experience, I'm glad you've had that experience. You know what these things are, but the techniques in the industry are changing so much that some of them get left behind anyway, and they don't know what's new. you know, some of them don't want to know about new technologies and stuff kind of thing. That's, you know, you've got to be up with the play. But just the fact that they will say, I'll say something and they'll say, no, no, it'll only work like this. And this is how we, yeah, when I was doing this on like The Color Purple, when we were shooting that, it was not, I don't know who shot that and I never worked with that person. But, you know, that's there's a feeling like that, you know, even at 44, that I'm like just some young guy doesn't quite know what he's doing. I don't know what I'm doing, but I know what I want to see, and I know how I want it to feel. And if that you're not doing what I want, then you're standing in the way of the thing moving forward. So I try and just tend to, when I meet people like that, I should explain to them just to shut up and do what I want.
Yep. I sort of do the same thing. I think for me, I said it, you know, if I went back to like 20-year-old me, I would just be like, do it now. I get it. I get that you think you have all this potential. But at some point people are going to be like, you're 30 and potential doesn't mean shit. So it's just finish what you start and do it now, because, and it's tough. It's very difficult to maintain a regiment and disciplined level of output and creativity. It's tough, especially sort of like Taika said, living for the muse. You're listening for the muse as opposed to putting pen to paper and just sort of hitting the gym, as it were, and just trying to see what happens. But yeah, that would be it for me. Do it now.
And also, I think if you're someone who's like a firefly or like a moth like me, you're like attracted to just like the light, and I want attention and I want people to see my stuff. Like right now, it's very hard for me to not be around lots of people and to have them say you're good at stuff. I'm like, well, that's where I'm like, what's the point in this shit? But the other thing I'd say, just to the advice thing, I know you're running your time, but is while I'm like, I sound like I've constantly been like, you know, don't rush it. There is something to be said for just not overthinking it. And if it's there and it's really like just putting it out there, because guess what? Here's the reality is no one's going to remember us 50 years from when we're dead. None of it really matters. Like, you know, that like I know a lot of people who are like, they'll spend 5 years writing something and like, you know, they were like, this is my thing. And then they'll put it out and it's like irrelevant. And the idea you had 10 years ago means nothing. And it's a piece of shit. So then I'm like, yes, do it now. Like that's, I was just saying it. That's like, yeah, it's like just, it's there, do it now. Don't wait. Like there's something like wait a little bit if you need to make it good, but don't put too much stock in this idea that like you were trying to make the most memorable thing that's going to change. Like, yes, it could change the world, but like you also want to make a lot of stuff because it's more fun to make stuff and to make more things than just one thing.
Yeah. No, yeah. Yeah, I think your career kind of speaks for that, right? You wrote Jojo Rabbit in 2012, but you took on 3 films while trying to get that made. So that's great advice.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I know people who would have just sat on that one script. And
right, exactly. So last question before we get to the audience, which we don't have too much time, so we're going to just try to rush through them. The last question here is sort of an homage to or a callback to our application process. We have a fun question usually. So for you guys, we've got what kind of food are you and why?
Szechuan peppercorn. I'm a tongue-numbing Chinese peppercorn.
I'm a cake. I'm sort of like a scorpion cake. You come in and get close to me and you think it's delicious, and then you just get stung. You eat of the cake, and then you realize there's no nutritional value, and it was just a fleeting moment, and you can barely taste it. There's no nice taste afterwards. It's just the taste of scorpion poison.
Fair enough. All right, let's open it up to the audience. We've got a few minutes here. We'll try to squeeze in 3-4 questions. The first one is by Mahira. It's for Utkarsh regarding second chances. So Mahira, go ahead. You're on mute still.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Utkarsh, Taika, how are you?
How are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks so much for making time for doing this. Really appreciate it. Utkarsh, you talked a little bit about second chances. There was that great article in the New York Times. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little about the process of bouncing back when you think you might have run out of chances. Like,
I don't think I've seen you since you did Rafta Rafta in San Diego.
and that is correct. Congratulations on your marriage.
Oh, thanks. I just told him you better not speak while I'm on with Taika. He's very important. I don't know how to speak to that other than that I was in trouble. I was having a lot of problems with, it's in the New York Times. I was having trouble with booze and with partying, and I asked for help. There's no other, not that complicated. I just was broken and I got fully fucked, and there were some people who recognized that and who had been through the same thing and offered to help, and I accepted, which was, that's pretty much it. I was like, I think I'm done. And people were like, hey, we used to be done. And then we got better. You want some advice? And I was like, well, I'm fucked. So yeah, if you have any tips by any means, and sort of slowly rebuilding myself from the ground up, things have been better. I can only say if somebody's struggling, ask for help. That's, I don't know what else to say.
Okay, cool.
Thank
you.
It's great advice, and we're glad you've bounced back and you're doing amazing work. So
You don't mean that. Yo, come on.
Get the fuck out of here. Get out of here, man. I've been following your work for a long time. I saw you in Modern Terrorism. You've been doing it for a long time. We're glad that you're still around.
Thanks, man.
Next question is from Swetha for Taika regarding adapting from film to TV. So let's get Swetha.
Oh, hi. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for doing this. You have elevated Monday nights to a completely different standard. So my husband and I have been binge watching What We Do in the Shadows. And we are big fans of the film and the series. And I wondered if you could just talk a little bit about some of the considerations that you made when adapting it. I love the fact that it's set in Staten Island. That's very jarring to see vampires, although I'm sure there are plenty of vampires there. So if you could just speak a little bit about that, I'd be very curious to hear.
Well, Jermaine is probably the one to talk about the most in-depth about this with, because he is the one I tricked into doing the main amount of work on the adaptation. Because originally I'd set up this thing with Scott Rudin and his company. Okay, let's turn this into a show. And then I sort of convinced Jermaine to do it. I said, Jermaine, we should do this. And then it's all right. We'll both work on it together. We'll make this show and stuff. And then he kind of went, okay. And then as soon as he said, okay, I got Thor. And I went, peace out. You're on your own. And I went off and did that. And he wrote that script for, by himself. And then I came in and I helped the casting and shot the pilot and a few episodes of that season. But I've just been kind of quite busy doing all these other things. And for me, I did the film. I don't really want to be immersed in that world for that much longer. That was really fun. Doing the first season was great. But I already felt like making the film was we're just turning a 5-minute idea into an hour-and-a-half movie. I was like, even that felt like a stretch. And now it's like the second end. We're doing another season of it. Turns out you can keep this thing going forever. And but it was really cool to be able to expand on that world. And I loved how the vampires were in Staten Island, and the ideas that they came to New York in whatever it was, 1840, and thought that Staten Island was Manhattan, and they thought that the entire time that they've lived there. And then because they've come there and their world has just been that island, and they haven't really experienced anything else. And I feel like that's just human nature in general. It's like, if you know you're going to live forever, you're going to slow down everything forever. You're always going to put off learning the violin. You're always going to put off becoming a virtuoso pianist, because you've always got tomorrow. And that's what humans, that's the point of dying, of having an expiration date, is so you cram as much as you can into a life. Because if you don't have one, you're not going to ever do anything. Like, none of us would create anything. There'd be no art. It's just really like, just, we are just by nature lazy pieces of shit. And and to give us this curse of eternal life, it would just, that is why it's evil.
Thank you.
Right.
Hi, Utkarsh.
Hey, nice to see you.
You too. Thank you.
Next question here is from Nushwa. Actually, before we get to Nushwa, you guys mind if we go a couple minutes late? I know we started a little late. I know, Taika, of course, you're probably on a tight schedule. Is it all right if we go a couple minutes late here, just to squeeze in another question or two?
Yeah.
Cool, awesome. So the next question is from Nushwa regarding working with kids. Yep, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? You can't see me though.
Correct.
Sorry. So, hi. Thanks for being here. This is really cool. So my question, Taika, was about casting and working with children. I would love to hear about your process with that.
Okay. Well, I've enjoyed, I've reaped many benefits from working with kids, but I will say it's not my favorite thing to do. It's very hard. It's very difficult working with kids. It takes longer. They're often unappreciative. but having said that, I do exploit the fact that they're cute and very watchable, and that helps me a lot with my film. But what I tend to do is I audition kids. I try and find a kid who closely resembles the character, and I try not to get them to act, because I think that it's enough pressure just to learn lines as a 10-year-old than to like give a 10-year-old a backstory and be like, okay, your motivation is this, and when you were like a 3-year-old, your parents died, and then I want you to think about that and then bring that to, like, it's just too much to try and put that into a kid's head. And so I try and find someone who basically is the character, and then all you have to do is get them to learn the lines and be themselves, and then turn the camera on. And so all of the kids, like, they just have had this thing, and that's like 80% of the work, I'd say, is casting, is finding the kid, finding someone who's naturally watchable. Because you can tell when kids are acting, the whole Nickelodeon style, this American style of kid acting, which is just like, oh, it's kind of like this, and you can just tell it's just like really gross and stagey kind of performance, and they're just, they're not being real. So I like to avoid all those types of kids, and that's really it.
Thank you.
Of course.
So we'll take one more question and we'll go from there. So Shahana has a question regarding being a person of color dealing with producers. So we can get Shahana going. Yeah, there's fireworks going on out here, so I apologize if you guys can hear that. And then my dog's freaking out back there. So.
Oh.
I know, it's happening quite a lot.
Every night, right?
Yeah, every night. Cool. Shahana seems like she's on.
Can you guys see me?
Yep.
It's so funny because I was just cooking my dinner and eating it, and I was like, oh shit. Okay, hi. So my question was specifically about being a person of color and dealing with producers who, especially when you write a script and you're trying to tell a story from your point of view, and a producer comes in, and then what they'll try to do is, based off of their kind of own perception of what they think your color represents, they'll try to insert a scene that they think is funny. I'm Pakistani, so like, for example, a lot of times they'll be like, well, why don't you say it with that accent? Or like, why don't you try, and I'm also a lighter skinned Pakistani, so then a lot of the times there's like confusion about like, how Pakistani are you really? And so I'm just wondering if, based off of the color of your skin, do you deal with any pushback when dealing with specifically with producers, when you're trying to get your story across and go like, listen, this story is legit. This is how I know it and how I experience it. Can we not try to tailor it to something that you think is right?
I'm a lighter skinned Māori man from the island nation of Aotearoa, New Zealand. But growing up in New Zealand, that's where I'd experienced the most pushback with things, and there aren't a huge amount of Māori directors and writers, and so sometimes I got a review for Boy from Variety magazine, who notoriously hate all of my work, and they said something like there wasn't enough cultural specificity in the film because it didn't feel like a native New Zealand film that we've come to know. And basically, what they were saying is there weren't enough kids riding whales in the movie. There weren't enough kids like talking to ghosts and trees and stuff, and it wasn't like, it's not like a ghost film, like spiritual, like with like nose flutes and shit in it. It's like, it's just got 70s pop songs and shit in it. So I would get pushback on things like that, which like, make it more Māori, make it more the thing where people can recognize this, make it like Whale Rider. And I always pushed back on that. And then coming to America, I found it was very different here, like, because I was obviously a foreigner, and I didn't experience prejudice in a way that minorities in America experienced them.
Right.
I experienced prejudice as someone from a tiny country that everyone laughed at or didn't know existed. So like, I'd come into meetings and go like, blah, 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 but I could have been white, and they would have just gone, I heard you've got more sheep than people down there. And it was just more like I was condescended to on a completely different level as just a foreigner from like an alien planet, and it wasn't about how I looked. So that's all I've had. I've never really experienced like a prejudice based on like my color in America.
Do you experience anything like that over here?
Come on. Yo, I don't think we have any Caucasian people on. So let's just be real. Go into the meeting. You say, hey, I'm used to people getting this wrong. And I know you aren't going to tell me to put a monsoon wedding scene in here. I know you're not going to tell me to do a Bollywood song. You would never do that. You would never tell me to use an accent because I know you guys are up to speed. Now I'm going to tell you my idea. And if you push back on my idea, what I'm going to tell all you white people is only one of us in this room is Indian, and only one of us knows what this story is. You're a Pakistani woman. Fuck them. Sorry to be angry about it, but I've been in these rooms so many times. And what I've learned is when I put them where they belong, which is in a place where they can be educated by our story, I feel better when I leave. But Taika started this off by saying, like, we tell our own stories. It's our responsibility. And like, it's challenging because we're going to run into a lot of bullshit. And a lot of what we do is paving the way for another generation to come after us. There's a lot of shit that I've done that I know is just in service of some 18, 19-year-old Indian kid to be like a lead role when he's 22, who hopefully is like, handles it well and doesn't pick up the bottle of Jameson like his big bro. But but I would say that to you. I would say if you're going to go into a meeting with these producers, give them the chance by laying out all the dumb shit they're going to say, and let them know they're not going to say it before they have a chance to.
Awesome. I think that's a great note to end on. So both Taika, Utkarsh, thanks so much. Reminder, everyone, this is the last Meet the Kalakar for a little bit. We're going to be taking a small break. We do have a new program coming up that we'll be announcing in the next week or so. Next up is Free Guy. Actually, I made a mistake. Comes out December 11th, not next month. And then Taika's got Next Skull Wins he's working on. He's in production next for Thor 2. And eventually, obviously, Star Wars movie. Cast Utkarsh, please. And thank you again so much, guys. Really, really appreciate this, Taika. Utkarsh means a lot. Thank you so much. Really, really thank you.
Love you guys.
Thank you guys. Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah.
Everyone. All right. Take it easy, guys. Thanks heaps.